Does Tibet count in the core of the India-China relationship or part of the India-China relationship? Which is the way forward for the Tibetan issue in the India-China relationship, in my perspective? Well, whether it is acknowledged or not, Tibet is always there. Tibet is the central issue in the India China relationship. India and China have never been neighbors in the past 2,500 years, ever since China was born. China was born about 2,500 years ago as a civilization or a nation or a culture. And India and China have never been neighbors until the Chinese annexation of Tibet, the illegal Chinese annexation and occupation of Tibet in 1955 at the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. And that is the first time that India and China have become neighbors of sorts. And that's the first time India and China have entered into a conflict. So the key to resolving this from our perspective, from the Indian perspective, and from the Tibetan perspective, is freedom for Tibet. Tibet needs to be restored to freedom. And the Chinese know this. The Chinese know that the Tibet issue is the core of the India-China problem, even though India and China never speak about it. China keeps talking about the one China policy, and India doesn't really comment about it. But the core issue and the key to resolving the problem is Tibet. So India needs to have a more proactive, more long-term. India needs to have proper long-term vision for how it wants to resolve this matter. India needs to resolve this in a manner that is advantageous to India as well as to the people of Tibet. And the Tibetans also need to take certain steps. For example, you have the Tibetan government in exile, and you have His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who lives in Dharamshala. Now, His Holiness the Dalai Lama needs to basically announce what is his plan for reincarnation. See, the process is that when the Dalai Lama passes on, when he dies, he is reincarnated somewhere in Tibet, and there are certain signs that the lamas have to look for, and then they travel all across Tibet, and then until they find a newborn child or a child who was born after the passing of the previous Dalai Lama, who exhibits certain signs and certain auspicious omens, etc. And then that child is taken as the next Dalai Lama. He is tutored in the ways of Buddhism and culture and all that, and eventually this child becomes the next Dalai Lama. So that is what His Holiness, the current Dalai Lama, underwent as a child. So now, whether we like it or not, His Holiness is very old now. He must be in his 80s now. So it may be a question of another 20 years, 20, 25, 30 years, if he lives long. I wish he does. But in the next 2-3 decades, he will unfortunately pass on, and he needs to announce his plans for his reincarnation. He needs to announce whether he will be reincarnated in Tibet, or whether he will be reincarnated in India or somewhere else within the Tibetan community. Because the Chinese plan to hijack the office of the Dalai Lama and appoint their own Dalai Lama. So if His Holiness the Dalai Lama announces that he will not be reincarnated in Tibet, he will be reincarnated either in India or somewhere else, then the Chinese claim to the legitimacy of their appointee as the Dalai Lama will evaporate. So this is one step that we need to do. We need to take. The Indian government and the Dalai Lama need to work together on this, and there needs to be a statement, because we cannot allow the Chinese to hijack this most sacred office. And this is currently the highest position in the Buddhist world, and one of the highest positions in the entire Dharmic world. So we cannot allow the Chinese Communist Party to hijack this very ancient tradition. So that's one thing that needs to be done. And secondly, India needs to have a long-term vision and a long-term plan over the next 20-30 years, in which Tibet can be freed from the claws of the Chinese Communist Party. Because the key to a lot of things, the key to security, stability, prosperity, and peace on India's northern boundary is the freedom of Tibet. If Tibet becomes free, then all the issues go away, and we will even have a land route to northern Asia and to the west through Tibet, etc. So these are things that are very important to India's long-term national security and to India's long-term future. And the Tibetans are our own people. Ethnically, they may be different, but they are part of our own culture. They are very close to us culturally, right? They are part of the Indosphere, you could say. We've always had the best of relationship with the Tibetan people for centuries, for almost 2000 years, ever since Tibet came into being in any way. So that's what needs to be done. India needs to take this very seriously. India needs to have a long term uh, vision and plan for this. For that, you need political continuity in India. India's democracy, unfortunately, is such that there is no political continuity. If the result of the next election is different and some other party comes to power, then they will reverse all the policies that are currently being implemented by the current governing party. So that is India's major problem. India lacks political stability, and India's some of India's political parties are outright anti-national, and they are basically in the pockets and on the payroll of outside forces. So these are the issues, these are the challenges that India needs to mitigate soon. Soon, I mean urgently. Something needs to happen about this. Something needs to be done. The national interest has to supersede any constitution, any federalism, any democracy, any laws that were passed 70 years ago. It doesn't matter what the constitution says. The constitution is a man-made thing. The geography of India, Bharatvarsh, is a God-gifted thing. So we need to put that above any constitution, any laws, any rules, any such thing. India needs to put its national interest, its long-term national interest at the forefront. Change the constitution if you need to. Bring in a new constitution if you need to. It doesn't matter. The national interest and the civilizational interest has to be paramount. So India needs a leader or leaders who have the fortitude to do this. That's what India awaits.